every single day that the Strait of Hormuz is closed is perfect marketing for the Chinese because it just displays American failings.
They're going to try and take advantage of President Trump's loose, free-flowing style.
They're quite enjoying sitting back and watching the Americans get caught up in the mess yet again. Another American president caught up in the quicksand that is the Middle East. I think the Chinese will try and exploit the situation because they are dealing with a much more weakened Donald Trump at this point in time. Hello, it's me, Yalda, and I'm currently in London.
And me, Richard Engel, and I'm in Lisbon.
So a big week for President Trump. He will be heading to China to meet with Xi Jinping. And it's the first time, Richard, that a US president has traveled to China in 9 years. It's also in many ways politically awkward because, of course, he is in this middle of this war with Iran. And every single day that the Strait of Hormuz is closed is perfect marketing for the Chinese because it just displays American failings. And it markets Chinese development, their technology, their AI, their clean energy. You know, all of these things that China is trying to build itself as a global superpower that rivals the United States. The Strait of Hormuz remaining closed, as desperate as they are to have it reopened because of the fact that they purchase so much Iranian oil and it does impact them. It is great PR for China.
Doesn't sound like solving Iran is going to happen, especially if you say the Iranians are happy, the Chinese are happy to watch Trump fail. And as you said right from the beginning, that Trump is going into these meetings not in the strongest position he's ever been in.
Yeah, and I think, look, the Chinese, are very careful about how they play their cards, and they don't want to get into a game where they're rescuing the Americans from the mess that they have created. They're quite enjoying sitting back and watching the Americans get caught up in the mess yet again. Another American president caught up in the quicksand that is the Middle East. The Chinese are sitting back and saying, we don't actually have to do anything here. The Trump administration, the Americans are digging their own graves, so we don't have to advise, we don't have to guide. But sure, behind the scenes, they're apparently talking to the Pakistanis, talking to the Iranians. They apparently worked with the Pakistanis to bring the Iranians to the negotiating table the first time round when they came to Islamabad. So they do have some leverage over the Iranians. But the idea that the Chinese would suddenly come to Donald Trump or the United States' rescue on the point of Iran, I think is, almost short-sighted and certainly not what regional leaders think that the Chinese will do.
All right, we'll put that in the strong, maybe unlikely category. What about the other ones?
Well, let's talk about Taiwan.
It seems like China and President Xi are trying to see if they have an opening with President Trump. Can they nudge him a bit? Is he the kind of personality who can be moved? Because differences here hinge on a word. For many years, the U.S. would only say it does not support Taiwanese independence. But if President Trump were to say he opposes it, well, that's a big difference, because not supporting it meaning, well, we won't come to their aid in a military conflict, but we'll send them defensive weapons. There's kind of wiggle room there. If you say you oppose it, well, that's one step further and further. So that's one thing. I think they're going to try and take advantage of President Trump's loose, free-flowing style and see if they can get him to move the dial away from Taiwan. And then there's these weapons packages, huge weapons packages. 11 billion was approved. Another 14 billion is in the pipeline. So that's $25 billion of American weapons heading toward Taiwan. And let's call it the making good on these orders hasn't been completed, even though Taiwan has approved the budget, says we have the money there, the $25 billion is ready to go, and there are members of the U.S. Congress who are pushing on President Trump to sign the deal. It is still in the works, and I think President Xi is certainly going to say to President Trump, slow down this purchase, don't take the $25 billion, and Taiwanese officials are very nervous about this particular part of the trip.
Yeah, I mean, and, the Americans have held back on one of those packages. And so, as you say, it's that will be making the Taiwanese government very nervous right now. As you say, everyone's going to be watching very closely around language and the kind of language that Donald Trump uses in this moment around Taiwan, what those aid packages mean. But also, to be fair to Taiwan, it has upped its defense spending. It does know that internally it needs to, sort of pull up its own socks when it comes to the training of its forces, spending more money on defense, having bigger defense budget packages, because it's about reliance, and relying too much on the United States when the United States can be so unpredictable. They would have looked at Ukraine and taken serious lessons, as did the Chinese, on the sort of toolbox that the West used vis-a-vis Ukraine, and the kind of toolbox that they have at their disposal in terms of the Americans. But it's also about reliance, right? And I think for both sides, it's about dependence at this point.
And before we move on, what about AI? I've read what some of the AI companies want to do. They're trying to establish, or some of them anyway, a basic baseline of communications. Can these two AI superpowers agree on anything? Anthropic has suggested, why don't they just start talking about something that everyone could, in theory, agree on? Let's not allow AI to make biological weapons, right? Seems reasonable. If we can agree on something, then use that as a starting point to agree on other things.
Yeah, and part of the delegation that Donald Trump is going to be taking will include these tech bros, leaders from Silicon Valley, the likes of Elon Musk, for example, to go and, have those kinds of conversations. But at the end of the day, they are rivals in this space. And when you look at the sort of tech leaders from within China, well, they don't have the ability to act freely, operate freely, think about business first. They have to think about national interests first. And so that is the fundamental difference, that the tech companies within China are working for the Chinese Communist Party. All of their aims, their ambitions, how they develop technology is for the progress and development of the Chinese government and the Chinese regime. So that is where fundamentally they're different. The one place that the Chinese have complete control and monopoly is in the rare earth minerals market. We're talking about everything from how your phone is produced to military hardware and other technologies. So it is essential. The Chinese do have a major, stranglehold over that market. It's something that they have developed and built over many, many years. So they want access to the sort of chips within the US market, and the Americans want access to the Chinese rare earth minerals. So I think that a certain number of statements are going to be made, whether it's about Taiwan or the Iranian issue that they're facing right now, and certain concessions and a truce. And the truce is going to be around rare earth minerals and chips. And the chips factor is going to alarm the American market.